So, um, I want you to start by picturing a very specific mental image of pre-Islamic Mecca.
Oh, I think we all have one.
Right. I mean, we all do. It's basically a Cecil B. DeMille movie set.
The classic Hollywood cinematic version.
Exactly. It's the year 600. It's nighttime. There are torches everywhere. And there is this massive temple just packed with gold statues and marble figures.
And it's chaotic, it's loud, it's completely decadent. You're picturing the age of ignorance.
Yes, Jahiliyya, and the centerpiece of that whole mental image is the Kaaba, just filled to the absolute brim with idols.
And tradition gives us a very specific number for that, right?
Exactly, 360. A different god for every degree of the circle.
Or every day of the year.
Right, it's this nice, perfectly round, totally overwhelming number. But here's the thing that keeps tripping me up as we get into the sources for today's deep dive.
The physical reality on the ground.
Yes. When you actually dig into the archaeological surveys of the Hejaz from the 6th and 7th centuries, that whole movie set it completely vanishes.
It doesn't just vanish. It is aggressively absent. And honestly, that is the hook of this entire historical mystery we're looking at today.
It really is.
Because we are so conditioned to think of the rise of Islam as this dramatic, physical smashing of a massive idol-worshipping infrastructure.
Right. Guys with hammers breaking marble.
Exactly. But when historians and archaeologists look at the ground truth of Mecca in the early 7th century, they just don't find the marble statues.
No golden calves.
No golden calves. The archaeological record is incredibly silent.
So for this deep dive, our mission is basically a forensic audit of Mecca.
I like that, a forensic audit.
We are going to strip away the later traditions, look strictly at the contemporary evidence, and try to answer a pretty radical question. Was Mecca actually pagan in the way we think it was?
Or have we been fighting a villain that never really existed in the first place?
Ooh, I love that.
Because it's really a question of redefining the villain. If the so-called pagans actually believed in the same God as the prophet, and if the idols weren't actually statues, then what was the fight even about?
Okay, let's start with the physical evidence, or I guess the lack of it. Because usually, religion is messy.
Very messy.
It leaves a huge footprint. If you have a major pilgrimage site with 360 idols, you would expect to find trash, broken pottery, votive offerings.
Inscriptions.
Exactly, writing on the walls.
And if you look at the rest of the region, that's exactly what you find. If you go up to the Negev Desert or North Arabia or down south to Yemen, the rocks are literally screaming at you.
Just covered in text.
Covered? We have thousands of inscriptions. We have ancient graffiti where people are invoking their specific gods by name. We have massive stone temples in Petra. We know exactly what Middle Eastern polytheism looks like in the archaeological strata.
But then you get to Mecca.
And it's just quiet. We absolutely do not find a strata layer containing 360 broken statues from the 630s.
Okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Mecca is in a valley, right?
Yeah.
It is famous for these massive flash floods. Couldn't all that evidence just be buried under 20 feet of silt? Or maybe the idols were carved out of wood and they just rotted away in the desert.
That's a totally fair pushback.
Because, absence of evidence isn't always evidence of absence.
Right, and the archaeology of Mecca is notoriously difficult because it's a living city. People have been building on top of it for 1,400 years.
Makes digging a bit tough.
Exactly. But it's not just the lack of statues, it's the lack of an epigraphic habit.
Meaning the writing on the rocks.
Yes, the carving of names and prayers into stone. That culture of writing is so prevalent in the north and south, but so different in the Hejaz. But even if we assume the idols were there, we have to completely adjust what we think an idol actually was.
Okay, this is where we get into the battles.
Yes, the Betyls. We really need to ask you to delete that mental image of a Greek statue with a face and hands and a little marble toga.
Gone. Deleted.
The Semitic tradition of the time was heavily focused on Betyls. And that word actually comes from Bet-El, which translates to house of God.
Oh, which connects directly back to the Bible, like Jacob's ladder.
Precisely.
Jacob wakes up from his dream, he sets up a rough stone, he pours oil on it, and he literally calls the place Bethel.
It is a shared Semitic heritage. These stones weren't representations of the god. They didn't look like the god.
They were dwelling places for the god.
Exactly. They were usually just unshaped rectangular stones. Sometimes they were just a natural rock formation that looked unique or striking.
So it's not litholatry in the sense of worshiping a rock. Because you think the literal rock is magic.
Right.
It's litholatry, as in, this rock is the conduit, it's the antenna.
That is a brilliant way to put it. It's an antenna. If you look at the Nabateans up in Petra, they worship their main deity, Dushara. But he is almost always represented as just a simple, blank, black, rectangular block. So if Mecca did have 360 idols, they definitely weren't an art gallery of golden men. They were probably a collection of standing stones or distinct rock outcroppings surrounding the sanctuary.
Which honestly makes the number 360 even more interesting to me, because you pointed out in the sources that 360 is suspiciously astronomical.
It is very suspicious. It matches the lunar year, roughly 360 days.
So are we looking at a literal head count here? Like, here is stone number 1, here is stone number 359, or is this entirely symbolic?
It's highly likely to be symbolic. In ancient Near Eastern thought, you don't really just count things for raw data. Numbers always have meaning.
Right, like the number 40 in the Bible.
Exactly. 360 implies a full circle. It implies a complete year, a totality. So describing the Kaaba as having 360 idols might just be a theological way of saying it controlled time.
Or that it represented the entire cosmos.
Exactly. It doesn't necessarily mean there were literally 360 physical objects cramping up the courtyard.
Okay, so we've significantly downgraded the movie set. We've gone from gold statues to rough sacred stones, and the number 360 might just be a metaphor for the calendar.
A lot less cinematic.
A lot less. But we still have to talk about the big bad, the final boss of this story.
Hubal.
Hubal. Because in the traditional history, which was written, about 200 years later?
Roughly 150 to 200 years, yes.
In those texts, Hubal is the absolute Zeus of Mecca.
He's the king.
He's described as this massive red cornelian statue standing right in the center of the Kaaba. He is the one the prophet's grandfather supposedly prays to.
He's the one the Meccan enemies invoke at the Battle of Uhud.
He is the literal face of the opposition.
He is the ultimate literary antagonist.
And this is the part of the source material that genuinely stopped me in my tracks. You are telling me he is not in the Quran.
Not once.
That feels impossible.
I know.
The Quran is not shy about naming names. It actively calls out a lot. It calls out Al-Uzza. It calls out Manat. It even mentions Baal.
It engages in very direct polemics against specific deities.
Right. But the supposed king of the gods, the chief villain of the entire era, total silence.
Scholars actually call this the Hubal paradox.
Why does it happen? If I am fighting a massive war against a religious system, didn't I have to attack the actual head of that system?
You would think so.
It feels like writing a comprehensive history of World War II and never once mentioning Hitler, but spending a whole chapter yelling about his regional managers.
That is a perfect analogy, and it leads us right to the most widely accepted academic theory.
Lay on me.
We have to ask, why do we hear so much about Hubal in the later histories, like Ibn Ishaq and Al-Tabari, but absolutely nothing in the contemporary source?
Because he wasn't actually that important at the time.
Exactly. Historians like Patricia Crone have suggested that Hubal might have just been an old, dusty tribal totem, a minor deity that wasn't actually central to the 7th century Meccan cult at all.
But then why make him the star of the later books?
Because later historians writing under the Abbasid Empire needed a cohesive narrative.
They needed a Goliath for their David.
Precisely. If you want to showcase the total world-changing victory of monotheism, it really helps to have a king of idols to topple.
It makes the victory so much more dramatic.
Right. It changes the story from, we convinced people to stop visiting a couple of local stone shrines, to, we marched in and destroyed the giant red statue of Hubal. It just clarifies the narrative arc.
So the Quran ignores him because he didn't really matter, but later history basically resurrected him because he made for a much better story.
That's the theory.
That is absolutely fascinating. But it does leave a massive vacuum. If they weren't worshiping Hubal, and they weren't running around a marble temple offering gold, what were the Meccans actually doing?
This brings us to the theology, and this is where we have to ask you to unlearn the word pagan.
Go on.
We usually think of this whole era as a binary conflict. Team A says there is no God but Allah. Team B says no, there are dozens of gods, and Allah doesn't even exist.
Right, a strict atheism versus theism or polytheism versus monotheism debate.
But the contemporary evidence suggests the Meccans were actually henotheists.
Henotheists.
Yes, they did not deny Allah. In fact, the Quran explicitly asks them at one point who created the heavens and the earth. And their documented answer is Allah.
Wait, so the pagans fully agreed that Allah was the creator?
Entirely. They named their own children Abdullah, which means servant of Allah. They swore their most binding oaths by him.
Wow.
They absolutely viewed Allah as the high god. The conflict was never about his existence, it was entirely about his administration.
Okay, you have to break that down for me.
Think of the cosmos like a massive corporate org chart.
Okay, I'm tracking.
The Meccans agreed that Allah was the CEO. He sits in the corner office on the very top floor, but they fundamentally believed that you, a lowly mailroom employee or just a regular merchant in the market, you couldn't just walk into the CEO's office.
He's too busy?
He's too busy, he's too important, and frankly, he's too holy. The power dynamic is too terrifying.
So you need middle management.
You desperately need middle management. You need executive assistants. You need someone to take your little prayer memo, put it in a nice folder, and carry it upstairs for you.
And that is what the idols were.
That's what the stones were.
And this is exactly where the daughters of Allah come in, right?
Yes, the Banat Allah. This refers to Allat, Al-Uzza, and Manat. The pre-Islamic Arabs actually described them in their poetry as the exalted cranes.
Why cranes? That's such a specific bird.
Because cranes fly incredibly high. The theological idea was that these specific entities could fly all the way up to the throne of God and intercede on your behalf.
So it's literal bureaucracy.
It is.
Which means shirk. The Arabic word we always translate as polytheism, it really just means association.
Exactly.
It's the act of associating others in the administration of the divine.
Precisely. And this right here is the emotional core of the historical conflict. We so often miss this today. The Meccans weren't violently fighting for the right to worship random rocks. They were fighting for their own psychological safety.
Because approaching the high god directly was scary.
It was terrifying to them. It felt unbelievably arrogant. It felt dangerous to just speak directly to the creator of the universe without a buffer.
It's like, imagine if the government suddenly announced today, we are firing all lawyers, all accountants, and all tax prep experts. From now on, you have to speak to the IRS Auditor General directly.
That is a deeply terrifying thought.
I would panic. I want my accountant. I need my buffer.
That panic is exactly what the famous Satanic versus controversy was actually about.
Really?
Yes, it was entirely about the cranes. The moment the prophet's message firmly shifted from a general God is great to a very specific verse. You do not need the cranes, you do not need the middle management. That is the exact moment the society fractured.
Because he was ripping away their safety net.
He was telling them the buffer was an illusion.
This perfectly tees up a theory from the source material that I think completely flips the script on this whole era. It's the Reformation theory by Gerald Hawting.
Hawting's work is fascinating.
It really is. He looks at all of this, the vague standing stones, the widespread belief in Allah, the shared Semitic heritage, and he asks a massive question. Are we actually sure these people were pagans at all?
Right, because if they aren't pagans, what else would they be?
Compromised monotheists.
Yes. Hawting suggests that the Quran might actually be addressing a society that already considered itself firmly monotheistic.
Maybe heavily influenced by local Jewish or Christian sects that were everywhere in the desert.
Exactly. But their monotheism had gotten messy over the centuries. They had let local saints and angels and these intercessors just clog up the spiritual pipes.
So in this view, the birth of Islam wasn't introducing a brand new God to a bunch of atheists.
No, not at all.
It was Reformation. It was someone standing up and saying, you guys claim to follow the religion of Abraham, but look at this absolute mess you've made. You have turned the holy sanctuary into a corrupt bureaucracy.
It frames early Islam not as some alien invasion of a new idea, but as a strict purification movement.
It feels very similar to the Protestant Reformation in Europe.
It's a great parallel. When Protestants attacked the Catholic cult of saints, their argument wasn't usually saints aren't real people. Their argument was, you shouldn't be praying to them, go directly to the source.
It just makes the ancient world feel so much more connected to me. Late antiquity wasn't just a bunch of isolated bubbles where everyone ignored each other.
No, they were incredibly interconnected.
You had Jews, Christians, Zoroastrians, and Arabs, all mixing together in this vast desert trade network, swapping ideas and fundamentally arguing about the exact same thing.
How do we access the divine?
And that really is the key word for this entire deep dive. Access.
Access changes everything.
Let's synthesize this for everyone listening, because we started this conversation with a movie set. Absolute chaos, giant gold idols, cartoonish evil villains.
And we're ending it with a highly nuanced theological dispute about cosmic bureaucracy.
But the stakes of that dispute were incredibly high.
The stakes were ultimate, Because if you strip away the cartoon movie villain aspect, the core innovation of the Islamic message becomes so much clearer and so much more profound.
The revolutionary message wasn't God exists.
Right, they already knew that. The message was God is close.
We are closer to him than his jugular vein.
Exactly. That is the radical, world-changing shift. The paganism, or the associationism of Mecca, was entirely built on the concept of distance.
God is infinitely far, so I need this sacred stone.
God is infinitely far, so I need this exalted crane to fly my prayer up to him. And the new message crashed in and said, God is here, drop the stone, drop the crane, speak to him yourself.
It completely democratized the divine. It took all the spiritual power away from the gatekeepers, the wealthy tribal chiefs who controlled the shrines and charged people for access, and it handed that power directly to the individual.
And that is exactly why it was so incredibly dangerous to the status quo.
Follow the money.
Always. It wasn't just about theology, it was heavily about power and economics. If you don't need the physical shrine to talk to God, you don't need to pay the guys who run the shrine.
I want to leave you with one final thought to chew on today. We have been zoomed way, way in on this one little dusty valley in the Hejaz. But we have to remember the global timeline here. This is the early 7th century.
And the entire world outside that little valley is basically on fire.
Literally on fire. You had the two massive global superpowers of the day. The Christian Byzantines and the Zoroastrian Persians just bashing each other into absolute oblivion.
It's often called the last great war of antiquity. They were exhausting themselves.
And because of all that endless war and plague, the mood of the entire Middle East, from Constantinople all the way down to Yemen, was fiercely apocalyptic.
People genuinely, deeply believed that the end of the world was imminent.
So when this new message suddenly appears in the desert saying, "The hour is nigh, purify your worship, cut out the middlemen," it wasn't just a polite theological lecture.
No, it was an emergency broadcast.
It was an alarm bell.
It really was. The intense urgency of demanding direct access makes so much more historical sense when you realize that basically everyone thought the curtain was about to fall on human history.
They literally didn't have time for middle management anymore.
Exactly. They needed a direct line to the king right now because they firmly believed the kingdom was coming tomorrow.
But that massive global context upon the apocalypse, the warring empires, and the actual end of the ancient world, that is a massive deep dive for another day.
Oh, it's a huge one. We definitely need a whole session just for that.
Thanks for investigating this historical mystery with us today. Next time you see that classic movie scene with the giant golden statues and the flaming torches, remember the historical reality was a lot quieter, a lot simpler, and honestly, a whole lot more human.
It certainly was.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.